I'm going to go into the sky next. I want to put some sort of value and color into the sky, but before I do that, I want to kind of resolve some of these shapes. I think, again, going back to that idea that the shape is important and the variety of the shapes are important. So I'm going to kind of try to break this up a bit more. So I've gone back in with this purple. This, if you remember, this was one of the colors I used early on. The blue is also a color I used early on, so I want to just restate that. So the cool color helps to define the shadow side of these trees. Okay, so let's play with the shapes here. So I'm going in with sort of a green color, viridian green. What I do at this stage is I want to start to kind of really think about the edge quality, drawing. So I'll have to get a little close to the paper to kind of see what those shapes are going to be like. Using this nice viridian green. As I get to the edge of the mountain shape with this pastel, I'm trying to kind of go over the two values very slightly so I get a softer edge. Okay, now is my opportunity. Okay, let me change the shape of this tree. I also like the line quality that we can use in pastel to suggest some movement. I'm going to bring some of the sky into the snow because you'd get some of that sky reflecting into the areas of snow. So I want to kind of bring some of this color in now. Okay. Now I'm going to go in with some warm color. One of the pieces of advice I heard was you can put sky color into the foreground, but you never want to put foreground color into the sky. The sky has to have a freshness to it. And if you get a bit of that foreground color in that sky color, you want to just clean your pastel off. I'll show you what I mean is if I kind of go along this edge, I'll pick up some of that color, and if there's a dark note, if I use it as it is, it'll muddy up the sky, so you want to clean that. Okay, so there we go. Well, that sort of gives me a value and tone to work with, and I can now, let's play with what I think is the funnest part of winter painting is that snow, that beautiful winter blanket. So I'm going to softly indicate any bit of cast shadow that I might see. And of course, this photo, I'm not getting the suggestion of texture and things like that. So I really have to rely on some of my field works that I've done in the past to kind of give me clues to how to handle the snow. Nothing like painting winter scenes. You know, if you live in an area where you have winter close by, you know, it's worth the effort to get out and bundle up, and remember, dress warmly and take good care of yourself out in the cold, but you'll find it to be a highly enriching time of year for painting. So now I'm going in with a pink color. One thing about snow is it tends to reflect all the colors around it. And so what you see often is you'll see variety of the primary colors in all aspects of the snow. So you'll get some reds, some yellows, some blues. And so here's my red color. It's a very pale, light pink. But it's got that red note I need. And Eventually I'll start adding the yellows as well. So one of the things snow rarely is just a flat white. So now this is the fun part. I can really use this. One thing about snow is you can start to carve out shapes with this color. So I want to just kind of lay it down. I also want the mark making to be kind of in the direction of the plane of the ground. So there's a slight slope. So I'm trying to make the marks kind of follow that plane. If it feels flat, the stroke will be, pretty much a horizontal stroke. If it's more of an angular, I'll do more of an angular stroke. This is really the time to kind of suggest what that plane is doing. And we don't want a flat surface on the snow. We want to have some nice texture. There's always little dips and clumps in the snow. It's rarely just this flat surface. So you want to break up the strokes, give them a nice variety. This is a point where we can really sort of scumble with this pastel, meaning just kind of lightly drag it, let some of that undertone come through. There's an example of a scumble. So, it's allowing some of the under color to pop through. Dry brush effect, you could call it that. Okay, so before over here, if I'm going to overlap a shape, I want to make sure that everything I want is below this where the snow will go. Because when we overlap, I want to kind of cut into that dark shape. So let's indicate some of this reflection. And it's soft, in contrast to the snowbank, it's sort of a softer edge. So look at all of the different edge qualities and let your strokes kind of emulate those edges. If it's a softer edge, just paint it, put it down more softly or soften it down. Now here in the photo, I see it's sort of a clump of rocks, but I'm just going to turn that into a bit of grass. It will help stop the eye right there where I need it to, and it will kind of relate to the grasses I put here in the distance. So that's sort of where the artistic license is being used, just to emulate the grasses that are in the background. It's one of those things because it's just a clump of rocks that are on its own. There's no friend for the rocks, essentially, no other family member. So I don't want it to be alone. So I chose to turn that into a group of grass. So it's got something to relate to. Let's talk about the colors. So white in nature tends to get warmer as it goes off into the distance. We talked about warm comes forward and cool recedes. When it comes to white, cool comes forward and warm recedes. So I'll make my snow warmer in the distance and kind of make it cooler as I come forward. I also want more texture in the foreground. So I'll add bits of the warmer notes, especially where you get plane changes. Like right here, maybe it's hard to see on the camera, but the snow it's somewhat flat and then it drops down. And so at that edge, a lot more sunlight is hitting the snow. So there's a temperature change. So let me show you essentially what we've got here. There's direct light hitting here and it's creating a warmer tone because it's direct sunlight there. And so right in here, I can warm this up. It's a subtle little suggestion. It might be in here too, because that plane change is catching. The sun is very subtly coming from this side, going this way. It's coming from the right side, and it's very soft because it's this sort of muted day. But it's coming in and it's hitting this plane, and it's hitting this plane. Here, it's probably hitting some of the planes back here somewhat. When you're at this location and you're painting from life, you can really see this photo, it tends to wash out that color. So I'll just warm that up a bit more, warm this up. So there's sort of a method to the snow pattern. And again, I think it's one of those things one needs to go out and see it, study it. One of the pieces of advice I was told early on was to know what plane you're working in, so know where that shape is, but also know what the sky is doing in terms of direct light, reflected light, or shadow, cast shadow. So here we have direct light. This is directly the sun's hitting it. Here, because it's a flat plane, we're getting a little bit more of the blue of the sky reflecting on that flatter plane. Here's the shadow. So the light's not penetrating this area, so it's creating that cooler note. It's so important to kind of analyze what the shapes are doing and how light affects them. So with the mark making, I'm trying to suggest what I think would be the various little planes of snow and try to create textures. So I'm just restating this dark shape again. I'm going to go back in and add some of these other color notes that I think initially we had incorporated in there. And if the mark goes down too hard edge, okay, so let me show you if I put it down too bright, see how that breaks that shape up? Just soften that down. You can soften it with the paper towel, soften it with your fingers, a brush. Kind of really pay attention to the softness of those edges. You're going in pretty light with the touch as I'm adding the indication of what's underneath the water. A little harder in the foreground, a little more defined shape, less as I go away from this foreground. Okay, let's continue on this pathway to the foreground snow. So I want to add some, bits of value change, very slight because it is a lighter plane, but I just want to vary that. I want to vary the color. It may seem like it's sort of haphazard and I'm just laying down the strokes. But I am kind of carefully thinking about, if there was, because this photo doesn't show me exactly the terrain of the snow, I'm having to rely on memory of, patterns of snow. So kind of placing it with thought in mind, but also, having fun with the mark making. This is definitely one of the fun parts of painting the winter scene, is putting this beautiful pattern of snow down. It creates an instant contrast. By adding variety in the strokes, I want that feeling of depth in the snow. That's an important quality. You know, snow is, there's a certain depth to it. So whether you're painting just a light layer of snow or a big, 3 feet of snow, you want that person to feel what that depth is like. So, keep that in mind when you're looking for areas to photograph where you see evidence of the depth. Let's get a bit of green in there. So that blue-green. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the temperature of this distant mountain, meaning I'm going to make it a little cooler. Just want to give it a little more depth. So what I want to do here is now, because I want to create a lead-in and a center of interest, is now I want to indicate maybe brighter notes of color, more contrast in areas. So I'm going to hit a little brighter note of color here, okay, especially that red against the green, and the eye will hopefully be drawn to that point. Now I want to echo that color a little bit, but on a softer idea here. One of the other things we can do to create a center of interest is create contrast. So right here where the tree is meeting that willow, I can put little harder notes of color or value just to kind of create contrast of edge. So a couple things we're using here. I'm using contrast of edge, contrast of color, sort of a warm against the cool, but also contrast in terms of brighter notes of color. So it gives me an opportunity to really sort of pick some colors that maybe I haven't used in the rest of the painting. So I'm going to now I want to define this area here, because I wanted the eye to go through here, follow up, come to this spot, have the eye stop because of the center of interest, and then go off into the sky. And so this is a perfect spot for me to kind of play up contrast. Let's grab some notes of color that's pretty intense, right? If I put it in other areas, this is where I want to be very gentle with the touch. So yeah, now is the opportunity to really kind of punch some contrast in there. So maybe some darks that don't exist anywhere else. If you want to draw the eye, just think of the contrast. We'll usually draw the viewer's eye to that point. This is where you can really use sharp edges too to draw the eye. So I'm going to kind of press down really hard. And then of course, as it goes away from that area, I can lose that shape a little bit. Okay, so at this point, let me show you how I might use the brush to soften some edges. And I don't use this a lot. I don't want it to be a habit, but you know, we can soften edges. See how that softened that down? Really. And it's only soft when it's in contrast to other areas that are hard. So you know, we could do that with another device is the, you know, using our thumb to feather edges. Feathering is a great tool to soften things down. Just be careful, you don't want to take that thumb and go into the snow, but it's a great device to just soften stuff down. Okay, so now before we call it, now is the point where I can start to indicate that slight reflection of the blue sky coming in. This really helps to give you that feeling of the water over the creek bed. Again, it's a very soft touch, but you start to feel that sky. Reflections in water tend to be darker than that's casting it. So the sky's value wouldn't be this. I wouldn't use the same color here to indicate the sky below because there's a value change. So you want to make sure that the value is slightly darker. Let me show you one thing that I find helpful, just to frame it with a piece of black tape. This helps to kind of give you a finished edge. And that was one piece of advice I heard too, is sometimes we're finished long before we think we are. And, you know, put it in a frame. Stick it in a frame and see if it's... sometimes that's all it needs. It's just the frame to finish it off. So what I'm doing with this is it gives me a way to frame it. And I'll sharpen those edges, right? That's what a frame does. It gives you that sharp edge.